Thanks, Suzanne, and good morning. Unique expressions of God that I see on my computer screen here. Wow, every one of you are beaming forth and right. Well, it's amazing how little things kind of tie together. That daily word that Gina read of that one paragraph in the middle. Even if the day includes less than happy experiences, I will know the quiet joy and comforting strength and peaceful presence of God that is with me always. Wow. And the title of my talk is Dealing with the Horseflies of Life, dealing with those things that can kind of be irritating. And I'll be looking at some of the spiritual practices that the gospel writer Matthew had preserved about Jesus teaching his disciples on how to deal with these things that were kind of irritating and sometimes downright oppressive. How do you deal with this? And these are essentially principles of non-resistance that have been preserved by us by this writer of the gospel. And I believe Kelsey put some possible forum discussion questions in the e-blast this middle of the week here. But some things we can be thinking about is, what spiritual practices, if any, have we used to confront these situations that were not quite what we expected in life? Or were we able to use some of these spiritual practices that I'll be touching on in the message today? Anyway, something to think about as we go through this little talk here. Well, sometimes our best laid plans can be undone by those that are closest to us. Take the story of Harry and Joe. Harry and Joe were marooned on a desert island. They had been there for some time. They're walking along the beach one morning and a bottle washed up on the beach from the ocean. And Harry picked it up and pulled the cork out and out popped this big blue genie. And the genie says, "Oh, kind sirs, thank you for releasing me from my prison here. I've been entrapped for a long time and I will grant you each one wish." And Harry, without batting an eye, says, "I wish I was back in Chicago." Boom, Harry is gone in a flash. And the genie turns to Joe and says, "Well, kind sir, what is your wish?" And Joe's standing there and thinking and reflecting. He says, I have never been good at making decisions. I sure wish Harry was here. So sometimes our best laid plans can be undone by those that are closest to us. And, and sometimes our friends can actually come in and help support us. About a week ago, Margie and I were watching this movie called Dream Alliance, or Dream Horse rather. The horse's name was Dream Alliance. And it's just a story based upon true events that happened over in Wales. This Welsh woman, she wanted to do something more with her life. She was working 2 jobs. She's middle-aged. Her husband's kind of semi-retired, and they're kind of scraping on along. And the whole town itself is suffering from the main industry of the town moving away, and people are having hard times with it. And she saw this one fella who would frequent this place where she was working, and this fellow was involved in a racing syndicate. Now, a racing syndicate is a group of people that own a racehorse. And she thought, wow, maybe I can do that. So she talks to this fellow about it, and then she starts doing research about how do you start a racing syndicate. And she starts talking up with her friends in the town, and she does some research, and she gets her friends to come to a meeting and buy into this dream that she has of having a racehorse. And she has these people commit to giving a tenner a week, which is probably a 10-pound note, to this having a racehorse. And in turn, they get to be involved in the decisions and the money that comes out of it. So her first little horsefly of life is not everybody was showing up. And all of a sudden, boom, all her friends come there. Well, she convinces them about buying a racehorse. So she buys a broodmare, and then she researches on the stud line that can father a good racehorse, and she gets the stud money. Of course, these guys and gals are all involved in the decisions. And a little foal is born, and she raises it. And then she's got to find a trainer. So she finds a well-known trainer that starts training this horse. And lo and behold, this horse starts to come into its own and starts winning races. And they're trying to figure out a name for it. And she says, well, how about Dream Alliance? Because we're an alliance of all this upbringing of this horse. And sure enough, this horse starts placing in these races, actually starts winning some races. And another horse, Fly of Life, kind of he gets injured in a race. And they're kind of betwixt and between of, do we spend the money and fix him or whatever? And she sees this vision that this horse can do it. So they do the vet thing for the horse, and boy, he comes back and he wins. And he actually, at the end, he is winning some big event in this Welsh racing circuit. And at the end of the movie, they show that, these people had all gained several thousand pounds from their investment of a tenner a week. And they also kind of got lifted up in their little town there. They were kind of just moping on along. Here, they get to go to the owners' dinners and special owners' box when they come to these big races, all 20 of them. And the whole town is now in the news, and the whole town's being lifted up by it. So in the last part of the movie, to show that it was a true movie, they have a picture of this couple. They have another racehorse that they had foaled out, and they're starting again because their other horse, this Dream Alliance, they put out to pasture and retired. So it's amazing how when we have one person has a little dream and he involves other people in it, how these things can come to fruition. And they blessed not only this woman and her family, but everybody in the town, and the whole town be coming around, because guess what? They're making news headlines about this horse from the little town of so-and-so, that's kind of what their little racing syndicate is now making big money. So it's a movie about overcoming, and it's a movie about positive thinking. Because all through the movie, they exemplify this woman as, staying positive in her dream. And when people want to disintegrate and let go, she helps regroup them. So staying positive in our thoughts. In Greek mythology, there is a goddess of memory, namaste, she's called, and she was the mother of 9 sister goddesses, which were called the Muses, that ruled over poetry and the arts and all the sciences. So we need to stay positive in our memories. Ancient Greeks had a god that kind of pointed to staying positive in your memory and how it affects all parts of our life. And it's easy to wallow into negativity and worry. My little mind, I like to worry about the least little thing for some reason if I'm not being active in that. It's almost human nature to worry about stuff. That way we don't risk disappointment, and we kind of also looking out for the bad things can happen. I think that's a throwback to our Neanderthal days. When our ancestors left the cave to go out and search for food, they were saying, they're not thinking that, I'm going to find all this food here, whatever. They were probably thinking about, what about that saber-toothed tiger? What about that woolly mammoth? They're kind of looking at the things that can befall them. So I think it's our human nature to look at the things that may be harmful to us. Or for example, we're praying for healing. Boy, we have called silent unity. We have done our best positive prayer work. And then middle of the night, we wake up, our little bathroom break, and all of a sudden we start remembering about the last time we were sick. Or sometime during the middle of the day, we reflect back and say, oh, wow, remember when back last February when I had this, we kind of undoing all that stuff. Or perhaps we're experiencing prosperity and things are really going good in life, and all of a sudden that little thought says, remember way back when you were scraping to put 2 nickels together? And, that happened to me every so often. I hearken back to my early Coast Guard days when I was just a young enlisted Coast Guardsman, married, and I was making $110 a month. And, sometimes we're going through the commissary, we had our little clicker, and we'd get to the clickers, we got to put something back because we don't have enough money to pay for this. So, Our inner mind is like a photographic plate, and these images can come back up sometimes at the least opportune time. So for a moment, just think about if we could have a God-filled memory. Anytime something good happens in our life, kind of saying, oh, that is spirit active in my life. Sometimes that happens. I misplace things around the house, and I'll say, all right, spirit. Sometimes I'll call my friend Philip Pearson, a longtime unity minister, and he reminds me that nothing is lost in spirit, Bob. So hold in the thoughts, and all of a sudden, boom, I find it. Or I'm looking for something, a book that I'm maybe using for a talk or something, and I look on my bookshelves, and boom, my vision goes right to it. I choose to say, that's a God moment. God steps in and say, Bobby, look right there. There it is. Don't worry about it. We're taking care of us. And when well, we have God in our lives, we can look at these things that God has taken care of us. My good friend who was my executive officer in the Coast Guard, one time I was bemoaning about, the other shoe is going to drop. Sure, I'm making it good here now, but the other shoe is going to drop. And he says, Bob, we're Coast Guard officers. When we pull somebody out of the water and save their life, they're on the deck, do we toss them back in? I said, no. Well, that's probably what Spirit's going to do with you. So knock it off. The Apostle Paul had written this letter to one of his communities about whatever is good, whatever is beautiful, whatever is kind. Think on those things. If our mind starts to wander back into, what about that time? Well, kind of can't do with a cancel, delete, like we do on the computer. And think about the good things. Do it back. And this title, Dealing with the Horseflies of Life. I came across two stories that kind of tie in with dealing with the horseflies of life. And the first one is the story about Abraham Lincoln. Now, Abe was traveling around Illinois. He was probably on one of his junkets. He had applied, before he became president, he tried to get several different political positions, and he didn't quite make them, but he persisted. He had done positive. And he was traveling around the countryside, and this old farmer was plowing in his field, and Abe stopped to chat with them and possibly tried to get his vote or whatever. And as he's standing there talking to this farmer with this plow horse there's this huge horsefly flying around this horse. And Abe wants to do a good turn for this, and he gets to shoo the fly away. And the farmer says, Abe, don't do that. If it weren't for that old fly, this horse would hardly move. So that reflected on a time when I had a horse. I had this 5-acre ranch in Modesto, and I had been given this horse. He was a thoroughbred gelding. My former spouse had bought him as a lesson horse to use in her teaching, but something happened at the stable and she could not put a beginner on him. So she says, you want this horse? And he was a trained horse in dressage. And I said, okay. Well, his name was Blake. And, sometimes that expression, never look a gift horse in the mouth. Perhaps I should have looked, but Blake had some goofy things, but he was a horse and I was taken care of. And one time I'm sitting in the kitchen and I look out and Blake is running around the pasture like a crazy horse. I go, what is, like something was chasing him. I said, what's going on here? So I went out there and I looked, and sure enough, there was this horsefly about as big as my thumb, just flying around the back of his withers, just chasing them all. And he's running. So here's this 1,100-pound horse being chased by this couple ounce insect, if anything, and just driving him nuts. So I caught him and brought him into the stable, into the barn, put him in the tie-up thing, and put fly spray all over him, and put what's called a fly sheet. It's a little thin blanket that kind of helps keep the flies off, and put a fly mask on his face, and resprayed him again and put him back out there. But I was just thinking about, these little irritants that come up in life, like in that Abraham Lincoln story, that fly, that irritant helped this horse move and helped the farmer do his work. And in my story with Blake, this fly was driving him crazy, destroying his serenity. So sometimes these little irritants that happen in our life, these horseflies of life, can help us move on with our work, or can really bug us and drive to our serenity. So that's how this title, Dealing with the Horseflies of Life, came into fruition. And I was looking, and I'm the Unity urban ministerial school Bible teacher, and there was some stories in the Gospel of Matthew. It's in the section called the Sermon on the Mount. And these come from actually chapter 5, verse 38 to 42. But the Sermon on the Mount actually covers chapter 5, 6, and 7, where the writer had put all these teachings of Jesus in these 3 chapters. So if you're thinking about, in Unity, we talk about, well, we look at the teachings of Jesus, not about Jesus, but of Jesus. If you're looking for what are the teachings of Jesus, check out Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. And in chapter 5, he starts out with this. Verse 38, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer, but if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn them the other. Well, this is kind of a multifaceted little thing. Eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And it was called the lex talionis. And I think in our criminal justice system today, let the punishment fit the crime. And this was actually an upgrade of what was previously happened in these Middle Eastern cultures. A lot of these Middle Eastern tribes, if another tribe killed one of their tribal members, they went and killed 10 of the other tribes, and it kept escalating up and up and up. So this law of lex talionis, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, repay whatever happened with something equal. You don't go way overboard on this. So it was actually something that came up, but Jesus kind of goes one beyond that and says, do not resist an evildoer, but anyone who strikes you on the right cheek, turn him also to the left. Well, in our culture, that may not mean something as significant as in a Middle Eastern culture. Because for somebody to slap you on the right cheek means that they use their left hand. And in Middle Eastern cultures, this is called the toilet hand. This is the hand that you kind of wipe yourself with. So using that is kind of a most disrespectful way. I remember when I was on active duty at this, it was a joint interagency task force. All the services were connected there, 5 of us plus federal law enforcement. And our people had to travel overseas at different things. So we would get these training films on the different cultures. And one of them was on this Middle Eastern culture about, the left hand, the toilet hand. And they had a story about this ambassador's wife. He was stationed in a Middle Eastern country. She apparently did not see the Department of State movie. And at a big dinner, she reaches with her left hand and grabs a dinner roll and pulls it off the table. I was like, oh my God. So, being aware of the local culture is something important as we're dealing with other people. So this being struck with the left hand means that's the most disrespectful thing that could ever happen to you. And to turn the other cheek, well, what it does then is you're standing up to this other person and puts them in a position of, if they want to strike you again, they have to use the right hand. And the right hand is kind of put you on an equal footing. This is the right hand is the one that people would conduct business with, they would sign and write things with, seal dealings. So it kind of calls the other person into question about, hey, I'm standing up to you, and if you want to continue, you're going to have to treat me as an equal. Came across a story about a young man who is hired at this one business, and a few weeks after he's hired, the personnel director called him into his office, and he said, son, what's going on here? He said, when you applied for this job, you said you had 5 years of experience. And now we find out that this is your very first job. The young man says, well, sir, if you recall in your ad, you wanted a person who had a vivid imagination. So he was kind of turning the other cheek to this personnel director and making this personnel director take a hard look at what did he actually advertise for? What was he looking for? And what did he hire? A second example that Jesus had told his disciples is saying, if anyone wants to sue you, take your coat, give them your cloak as well. If somebody wants to sue you and take your coat, give them your cloak as well. Well, back in the first century, people usually had just 2 changes of clothes, not like a closet full like I got in back of me. And they had a thing, 2 coats and a cloak. Now the cloak also did double duty of being a covering for sleeping at night. And so in the Mosaic law, if you took a cloak in pledge, you had to return it every night. So people could sleep and be warm. So the upshot of this is, if somebody is suing you and they're taking one of your coat, they can't take both your coats because that would be naked, which is also another Mosaic thing you couldn't do. But to give them the cloak. So that means that they had to come back every night and kind of revisit what they have done to you. So, the third example that he talks about is if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, but also the second mile. Somebody asks you to go 1 mile, do the second. What does that mean? Well, guess what? In the first century, the Romans were the powers that be. They were in control of the world. They were in control of this area of Palestine. And by Roman law, a Roman legionnaire could commandeer one of the citizens and say, carry my pack. But they could only carry it for a certain distance. And what Jesus is saying, okay, you get to the end of that distance, say, no, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to go on further. Well, guess what? That puts this Roman legionnaire in violation of his own law, because he could only command people to go 1 mile or 1 stadia, whatever it was. And here he goes. So then this Roman soldier now has got to say, okay, come on, give me my pack back. You're putting me in jeopardy. So how does this apply? Well, it's the power of choice. People make you do something and then you choose to do even more. There's a story about this waitress. The owner of the business required every waitress to greet their customers with a big smile. Well, this resulted in a lot of plastic smiles, except for this one waitress. She was always smiling. She was always happy. And the boss calls her over one day and says, what's going on? How come you're always so happy? And she says, well, the first smile of the day was the one that was required. But all the others were ones that I get to do. I chose to do that. So she changed this wording from, oh, I have to do this, to I get to do this. And I've used that several times in life, or I may be given an unpleasant assignment to do something, or something I really don't want to do, and say, oh man, I have to do this. But something happens in our mind when we say, I get to do this. I get to do this rather than I have to do this. So, and the last one is maybe a little bit difficult. He says, in verse 42, give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. Everyone? Anyone? Do I have something written across my forehead saying easy touch? Oh my God. And here I know in Sacramento area, we have a good amount of homeless people living on the streets. Every street corner, there's somebody with a little sign, am I supposed to give to everyone there? Well, we can give in other ways. We can acknowledge their presence and say, no, thank you, and send a silent blessing to them that Spirit will come into their lives and move them out of their current position. I think the hardest thing that I've heard from people and read about this homeless people on the streets is just being invisible. They're kind of ignored. And that was driven home. This past week, I was going to my credit union over here, the local safe by the local Rayleighs, and I'm headed towards my credit union. I heard somebody say something, but I didn't even pay attention to him. And there's another woman coming to the Safeway, and he blurts out again, and there's this couple behind me. And it looked like kind of like a homeless people, and they were asking about light rail or something. But I just kind of just blew right past them. They didn't even cross my radar. So, not being ignored, but just saying no thank you on something, or acknowledging their presence. I think that helps them, and sending that silent blessing of, I behold the Christ in you, and lifting them up. So I think, Jesus' message is acknowledging that connection with others. And I recall when I was living in Modesto, I was working at the public defender's office, and we were in downtown, the office was in downtown Modesto, and I had a park on the other side of what was 9th Street. And 9th Street was kind of the street where a lot of the homeless hung out. So here I am in my little sport coat and tie, and people are coming to, they see me and they say, well, hey, you got any spare change or whatever? And I was kind of getting fed up with that. And one day I'm coming home and I'm going to go cross 9th Street to get to my car. And this fellow's there, and he was kind of clean cut. He had a cowboy hat on and some jeans. And he said, sir, can you help me out? Oh, here it comes. What's the kind of story I'm going to get now? And he says, I need to get down to Fresno. My brother is sick, and I don't quite have enough money to get the bus ticket. And I said, you need to get down to Fresno, huh? I said, I'm going to put this guy in his comeuppance, because the Greyhound bus depot is right diagonally across the street. I said, so you need a ticket, huh? I said, well, let's go see about that. So we come across the street, and I'm kind of walking quick step, and he's keeping right up with me. And he says, I only need like $9 and something to get the rest of my bus ticket. And so I walk into the bus depot. He's right with me. Go up to the counter. And this gal behind the counter says, hey, do you still need that ticket to Fresno? I said, oh my God, the guy's telling the truth. So I took out my wallet, my Visa card, says, give him a ticket to Fresno and put it on this. And then he said, well, here, take this money. I said, no, you go up to this next street up here, and about halfway up on the left-hand side, there's a nice restaurant. Get yourself some dinner, because the bus is not coming until like 8 p.m. tonight. So here it is. This guy was really stuck somewhere. And so we really don't know what these people are that are asking, because I'd gotten stung before, given something, and then people take off and they're kind of pull a fast one on him. Well, this guy he was truthful. So you never really know what's going on in people's lives as they're out there with homelessness or whatever, or needs. So what did we do today? We looked at essentially some principles of non-resistance that are in the Gospel of Matthew. And we can apply these to real world situations on dealing with these horse flies of our life. Some things that are just irritating, and some that are downright disrespectful to us. And all these little examples and principles kind of focus on our second principle, the unity. I'm naturally good because God's divinity is in me and in everyone. I like to add, God's divinity is in me and in everyone, regardless of appearances. So namaste, dear ones. Let's move into our period of meditative reflection. And we can sit quietly on our chairs. We can let our gaze be softly forward at our Hollywood Squares group of beautiful, unique expressions of spirit in front of us. Or we can close our eyes. Become aware of our breath. Feel the gentle rise and fall of our chest as we breathe in and breathe out. This wonderful process called respiration, where we inspire, we draw spirit into us, and we exhale, and we release any negative thoughts that may be rattling around in our brain, any thoughts of worry or anxiety or concern. And we bring our attention on our next breath, following it down through our nose, our trachea, down into our chest center, and keep our attention focused on our heart center, our heart. Perhaps we can even place our hand on our heart and feel the gentle beating as it continues on, sending blood to each and every cell of our being. This wonderful processes of respiration, inspiration, digestion, and stuff that goes on in our wonderful body temple, that we are grateful for being alive and having our wonderful senses of sight, hearing, touch, feeling, to bring this outside world into us. And if there's any part of our body temple that needs that healing hand of spirit, imagine blood-filled, spirit-filled blood flowing from our heart center to that center of our body that's causing us any discomfort. And see that entire area of our body temple being wrapped in a blue, white light bubble of healing energy, bringing about the right and perfect healing at the right time and in the right way. And if there's any person, place, or thing that needs that healing hand of spirit, and we think in particular of our brother John, we image John in our minds and we see him wrapped in a blue, white light healing bubble, bringing healing and the right and perfect time. And as he goes to the doctor tomorrow, that doctor or healthcare visitor or healthcare practitioner, being the best that he can be in giving care to John. And if there's any other person, place, or thing in our life that needs that healing hand, we imagine that now too. And Jesus of Nazareth, when asked by his disciples, saying, Lord, teach us how to pray, he told them to go within to the closet of their being, their heart center, shut the door to the outside world. And our Father, which hears in secret, speaks in a small, still voice. So we go within to that closet of our being. We mentally shut the door to the outside world. And we keep our attention focused on our heart center. And as I ring our chimes 3 times, we'll move into a period of silence and listen to that small, still voice that may be there, or perhaps images flashing across the screen of our mind, or thoughts floating through our mind, as we gently rest in the silence for a few moments, or a few minutes rather. And now, as we're in this meditative, reflective state, I invite you to stay muted, but speak the name of any person that needs that prayerful consideration. Perhaps it might even be somebody who is a little irritating in our life, like a horsefly of life, or somebody that needs an extra special blessing in their life to be lifted up and carried forward. And now we bring our awareness back to our body temple. We become aware of the presence of our feet on the floor, the pressure of our body against the chair, and we gently open our eyes if we have them closed, and we become fully present. And as long